In May 1997, 6 weeks after Amazon went public, Jeff Bezos wrote a one-page letter to his shareholders that contained a sentence almost nobody at the time understood. It said that, for the foreseeable future, the company would lose money on purpose. That single line, repeated with small variations in every annual shareholder letter for the next 20 years, was not a confession. It was a strategy. Bezos wasn't apologizing for the losses. He was telling investors in plain English that the losses were the product. Spend on infrastructure. Spend on customers. Spend on capacity. Run the company at break-even or below. Make the loop spin faster. Almost nobody outside of Amazon's executive team understood what the loop was. Wall Street thought he was irresponsibly burning cash. Competitors thought he was incompetent. Customers thought he was generous. He wasn't any of those things. He was building a machine that, once spinning fast enough, no one would be able to stop. This is the story of Jeff Bezos, told from inside the loop. If you find untold business history stories like this one valuable, hit subscribe before we go further. New videos every week. The best way to support the channel is to like the video and let YouTube know what you want more of. Section 1. The adopted kid who wanted to live in space. Jeffrey Preston Bezos was born on January 12, 1964 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His mother, Jacqueline, was 17 years old at the time. His biological father, a circus performer named Ted Jorgensen, was barely in the picture and quickly vanished from it entirely. A few years later, his mother married a Cuban immigrant named Mike Bezos, who legally adopted Jeff and gave him the surname that would eventually appear on the side of warehouses in 200 countries. Even as a child, Jeff was not ordinary. He was fascinated by mechanics, electronics, and, strangely for the era, outer space. At his Miami high school graduation, when most teenagers were thinking about college, he gave a speech stating his ambition to one day build orbital colonies and amusement parks in space. The audience clapped politely. Decades later, the line would seem prescient. At the time, it just seemed odd. He enrolled at Princeton in 1982 to study theoretical physics. He soon realized that, brilliant as he was, several of his classmates were more brilliant. Students who could see solutions to physics problems instantly, while he had to grind through them. He switched majors to electrical engineering and computer science, where the ground was firmer, and graduated summa cum laude in 1986. Section 2. The Wall Street Years. Most people forget, or never knew, that Bezos spent the first 8 years of his post-college career not in tech, but on Wall Street. He bounced through a few jobs before landing at D.E. Shaw, a quantitative hedge fund run by David Shaw, a former Columbia computer science professor who'd built one of the earliest algorithmic trading operations on Wall Street. Shaw's firm hired people the rest of the street wouldn't: physicists, mathematicians, computer scientists. The culture was less finance and more applied math. Bezos thrived there. By his late 20s, he was a senior vice president. He was on a track toward becoming exactly the kind of quiet, ultra-wealthy fund executive that Manhattan produces by the hundred. It was at D.E. Shaw that he met Mackenzie Tuttle, a young analyst with a Princeton English degree, a quiet intensity, and an interest in fiction writing. They were engaged within 3 months of their first date. His career trajectory at that point was beautifully predictable. Then a single statistic shattered it. In 1994, during a research project at D.E. Shaw, Bezos came across a report on the early internet. The number that caught his attention was almost difficult to believe. The internet was growing at 2,300% per year. That wasn't a typo. It wasn't a misreading. World Wide Web usage was multiplying 23-fold annually. There had never been a technology in human history that scaled at that rate. Bezos understood immediately what most people on Wall Street didn't. This wasn't a trend. It was a phase change. Whatever industries existed on the other side of it were going to be entirely new industries, run by entirely new companies with entirely new rules. He sat down and made a list. 20 product categories that could plausibly be sold online: CDs, software, clothing, office supplies, dog food, books. He worked through the list methodically, applying filters. The product had to have millions of titles or variations, so an online catalog could offer something a physical store couldn't. It had to ship well. It had to be a standardized item where customers didn't need to physically inspect each unit. It had to be a category where customers wouldn't need much sales support. One category survived every filter: books. There were several million unique book titles in print at any given time. No physical bookstore could carry more than a tiny fraction. Books shipped well, came in standardized formats, and were already cataloged with ISBNs. Books were, as he later put it, the perfect entry point. They weren't the destination, they were the doorway. Bezos told David Shaw he was quitting. Shaw, by all accounts, tried to talk him out of it. The conversation went something like, "This is a great idea for someone who doesn't already have a great job." Bezos went anyway. He and Mackenzie packed their lives in New York and drove west towards Seattle, a city he had chosen for two specific reasons. One, it was close to a major book distribution warehouse in Roseburg, Oregon. Two, it had a robust tech labor pool from Microsoft and Boeing. The famous detail of that drive is real. Mackenzie drove. Bezos sat in the passenger seat with a laptop and wrote, somewhere between Pennsylvania and Washington State, the first business plan for what would become the largest retail company in human history. He named it Amazon, not for any complicated reason. He wanted a name that started with A, so it would appear early in alphabetical lists, and the Amazon River was the largest river in the world. The metaphor was unsubtle. The first office was a converted garage in Bellevue, Washington. The desks were doors mounted on sawhorses, an icon of frugality the company would deliberately preserve for decades. The seed money, about $300,000, came primarily from his parents, who later acknowledged the money came from their retirement savings. Mike and Jacqueline Bezos, the adoptive father and the 17-year-old mother, became the first investors in Amazon. Amazon's website went live on July 16, 1995. The first book sold was a graduate-level computer science text titled Fluid Concepts and Creative Analogies, purchased by a man who happened to be a friend of Bezos. Within 30 days, orders were arriving from all 50 states and 45 foreign countries. In the early days, employees would ring a bell in the office every time a sale came in. They had to stop ringing it within a few months because the bell never stopped. Bezos was not interested in celebration. He was interested in a specific mechanism that would only later be called the Amazon flywheel. The mechanism was simple to state and difficult to execute. Lower prices brought more customers. More customers brought higher volume. Higher volume created economies of scale. Economies of scale lowered Amazon's costs. Lower costs allowed lower prices. Once that loop started spinning, it didn't need a leader. It just needed to be fed. Most retailers in 1995 didn't think this way. They thought in terms of profit margin per unit, brand differentiation, customer segments. Bezos thought in terms of a feedback loop. He didn't care about quarterly profit. He cared about whether the loop was getting faster. In May 1997, Amazon went public at $18 a share. The company was still losing money. It would continue losing money for most of the next 10 years. A month after the IPO, Bezos wrote his first letter to shareholders. It was 3 pages long. It would become the most quoted document in modern business history. The letter laid out a philosophy almost no public company had ever publicly committed to. He told shareholders that Amazon would prioritize long-term market leadership over short-term profitability. He told them the company would make bold, not timid investment decisions. He told them that some bets would fail. He told them that Amazon would obsess over customers, not competitors. And here's the line everyone missed. He told them that the company's financial reports would, by traditional measures, look bad. For a long time, this wasn't humility, it was permission. Every year afterward, in every annual letter, Bezos reattached a copy of the 1997 letter and reminded investors, this is still our approach. It became the contract between Amazon and Wall Street. You agreed to this. Don't get angry at us now. For 20 years, almost nobody on Wall Street ever truly held him to short-term profit targets. He had pre-vaccinated the company against the most dangerous force in public markets, investor impatience. That single document, 3 pages written in plain English, may be the most valuable piece of corporate writing in modern history. In 1995, Bezos made a decision that almost everyone in retail considered insane. He let customers write reviews, including negative reviews, directly on Amazon's product pages. Publishers were furious. Authors threatened to pull their books. Booksellers warned him he was undermining the entire industry. Their argument was simple. Why would you let people trash the products you're trying to sell? Bezos' answer was that he wasn't trying to sell products. He was trying to help customers make decisions. If a book was bad, he wanted customers to know, because customers who trusted Amazon would buy more from Amazon, even if individual books didn't sell. This was the loop again. Trust was an input. Long-term customer behavior was the output. The reviews didn't sell books. They sold Amazon. By the late 1990s, customer reviews had become one of the most visited features of the website. People went to Amazon not just to buy, but to research. They'd find what they wanted on Amazon and sometimes buy it cheaper elsewhere. Most retailers would have considered that a failure. Bezos didn't. He knew that eventually, buying habits drift toward the place that becomes trusted. In March 2000, the dot-com bubble burst. Tech stocks collapsed across the board. Amazon stock fell from over $100 a share to under $6 within 18 months. Headlines that had once celebrated the company turned brutal. A famous Barron's cover story declared Amazon bomb. Several major analysts predicted bankruptcy within a year. Internally, Amazon executed the most disciplined contraction in tech history. Bezos cut what needed to be cut. Headcount fell. Side projects were canceled. Burn rate was slashed. But, and this is the part that mattered, the loop didn't stop spinning. Customer numbers kept growing. Order volume kept growing. Cost per order kept falling. Trust kept compounding. By the time the broader tech industry stabilized in 2002, Amazon was structurally stronger than it had been before the crash. Its competitors, Pets.com, Webvan, eToys, Boo.com, had vanished. The companies that had been Amazon's direct rivals in the 1990s were almost all gone. Amazon was alone in the field. The crash didn't break the loop. It killed everyone else and gave the loop more room to spin. Section 9. Prime, the loop's most brilliant spoke. In February 2005, Amazon launched Prime. For $79 a year, members got free 2-day shipping on millions of items. Industry analysts thought it was a disaster. The math seemed obvious. Free shipping cost Amazon money. The membership fee couldn't possibly cover what shipping actually cost. They'll lose hundreds of millions on this, one analyst wrote. He was right, they did. But the math wasn't the math. The behavioral math was different. Prime members didn't just buy more, they completely stopped comparison shopping. Once a customer paid $79 a year for free shipping, They wanted to maximize the value of that membership. They bought everything they could from Amazon, even when it was slightly cheaper elsewhere, because shipping had already been paid for. Prime didn't sell shipping, it sold commitment. Once a customer was a Prime member, they were psychologically locked in. The membership wasn't the product, the membership was the trap. By 2020, Prime had over 200 million members worldwide. That single program became one of the most valuable customer retention mechanisms ever built. Section 10. The Accidental Empire, AWS. Around 2003, Amazon's internal engineering team had a problem. The company's growth had become so explosive that no team could build new products without spending months reinventing the same infrastructure: servers, storage, databases. So they started building a set of standardized internal tools that any team could use. The tools worked so well that engineers started joking that Amazon should just sell them to other companies. In 2006, that joke became Amazon Web Services. AWS quietly opened to the public, offering on-demand computing power and storage to anyone with a credit card. Within 5 years, AWS was powering Netflix, NASA, the CIA, and tens of thousands of startups. Within 10 years, AWS was generating more operating income than the entire rest of Amazon combined. The retail business everyone had been watching for 20 years was, at the corporate level, partially a front for the cloud business nobody had been watching. By the late 2010s, an estimated third of all internet traffic in the world ran through Amazon's servers, including, ironically, parts of the digital infrastructure of Amazon's biggest retail competitors. The loop had a new spoke. Bezos hadn't planned for it. The internal mechanism had simply spit out a second business larger than the first. Section 11. The Marketplace and the Cloning Question. In 2000, Amazon launched its third-party marketplace, allowing other sellers to list products directly on Amazon's site, competing with Amazon's own retail operation. This, again, looked insane to outsiders. Why invite competition onto your own platform? Bezos' answer was structural. Marketplace let Amazon offer products it didn't have to buy, store, or ship. More important, it let Amazon collect data on what was selling, to whom, at what price. The marketplace wasn't a competitor to Amazon's retail business. It was an enormous, free, real-time market research operation. For 2 decades, marketplace sellers happily flooded in. Then a pattern began to emerge. Sellers noticed that their successful products were quietly getting Amazon-branded competition. Same features, lower prices, better placement in search results. Reports surfaced, eventually substantiated by investigative journalism, including reporting in the Wall Street Journal, that Amazon was using its internal marketplace data to identify successful products and launch Amazon Basics versions of them. The company denied a systematic policy of doing this, but to outside observers, the pattern was hard to miss. The marketplace was a discovery engine, and Amazon appeared to be using it to discover what to clone. This was the loop running at full speed. Every seller who succeeded on the platform was, unknowingly, paying for the privilege of being studied. Section 12. The Body Count. Between 2000 and 2020, an extraordinary list of American retail giants either went bankrupt or shrank dramatically. Borders, Circuit City, Radio Shack, Toys R Us, Sears, JCPenney, Pier 1, Barnes & Noble in severe contraction. In each case, Amazon wasn't the sole cause. But in each case, Amazon was the immovable competitive pressure that the older companies couldn't escape. Walmart was forced to spend tens of billions of dollars rebuilding its own digital and logistics infrastructure just to remain competitive. Bezos' famous internal line, "Your margin is my opportunity," was repeated so often it became industry shorthand. The loop didn't just absorb retail. It quietly restructured how almost every American product was made, priced, and delivered. Section 13, the departure. In February 2021, Bezos announced he was stepping down as CEO. There was no scandal, no board pressure, no succession crisis. He simply turned over the chair to Andy Jassy, the longtime head of AWS, and stepped away. The timing was, to anyone paying attention, exquisite. Regulatory pressure on Amazon had been mounting for years. The Federal Trade Commission was investigating the company's marketplace practices. Congress had hauled Bezos in to testify in 2020. Antitrust action was widely expected. By stepping down as CEO, Bezos personally insulated himself from the political target on Amazon's back. He kept his ownership stake. He kept his board chairmanship. He simply stopped being the face of the daily operation, at exactly the moment the daily operation became politically expensive to lead. He's doing what the boy who gave that high school graduation speech said he'd do. Blue Origin, his rocket company, which he had quietly funded since 2000, became his new full-time focus. Where competitors like SpaceX were chasing Mars and headlines, Bezos was working on something stranger: orbital industrial habitats. These orbital industrial habitats would be large enough to move all heavy manufacturing off Earth, leaving the planet for living. He framed it bluntly in public talks: Earth should be a place to live, not a place to manufacture. Meanwhile, his personal life became tabloid material. He and Mackenzie divorced in 2019. She walked away with roughly 25% of his Amazon stock, about $36 billion at the time, and immediately became one of the most prolific philanthropists in the world. Mackenzie gave away the majority of it within 5 years. Bezos, by contrast, spent some of his fortune on a $500 million super yacht, so large it required a separate support yacht to function. The internet had its opinions. But the bigger picture is the simpler one. The loop is still running. Amazon, even without Bezos at the helm, continues to compound. AWS continues to grow. Prime continues to expand. The mechanism doesn't need him anymore. That was always the point. Here is what the conventional story of Jeff Bezos gets wrong. He didn't build a bookstore that turned into an everything store. He didn't get lucky on the internet bubble. He didn't simply outwork his competition. He built a loop, a self-reinforcing economic mechanism. The loop required engineered losses as fuel, customer trust as feedstock, and infinite patience as its operating temperature. Once the loop was spinning, no individual business decision mattered as much as the loop itself. Books were a spoke, AWS was a spoke, Prime was a spoke, Marketplace was a spoke. The flywheel didn't care which one fed it most, it just needed to be fed. The real lesson of Bezos isn't customer obsession, though that was real. It isn't long-term thinking, though that was real too. The lesson is structural. The most dangerous companies engineer a loop that wins at all products, in all markets, over all time frames. Bezos didn't sell you anything. He built a machine that sells you everything. Then, he handed it to someone else and walked off to build colonies in space. If this video held your attention all the way to the end, the best thing you can do for the channel is hit the like button. It's how YouTube knows to show this to more people. And subscribe before you go. New stories from the hidden history of business and money every week. Drop a comment below. Was Bezos' most ruthless move the customer reviews, Prime, AWS, or the marketplace data cloning? I read every reply. I'll see you in the next one.